Growing up, it was always just me and my mom, 52F, in our small two-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Portland. Mom worked long hours as a nurse at the local hospital, often pulling double shifts to make ends meet. I spent a lot of time with our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, who would watch me after school until Mom got home. I have vague memories of my dad, 55M, from when I was very young, the smell of his cologne, the scratchy feel of his beard when he kissed my cheek, the sound of his laugh echoing through our old house. But those memories faded quickly after he left when I was 2. Mom didn't talk about him much, just saying he wasn't ready to be a father. I learned not to ask as I got older, seeing the sadness in her eyes whenever he was mentioned. Despite the challenges of being a single parent, Mom did her best to give me a good childhood. She'd wake up early on her days off to make me Mickey Mouse pancakes, my favorite. We had a tradition of Friday night movie marathons, cuddled up on our worn-out couch with a big bowl of popcorn. Every summer, she'd scrimp and save to take me on a weekend trip to the coast, where we'd build sandcastles and hunt for seashells. I was a quiet kid, more comfortable with books than people. I struggled to make friends at school, often feeling like an outsider. The other kids seemed to sense something was different about me. Maybe it was the second-hand clothes or the fact that I never had a dad show up for career day. Whatever it was, I spent most of my recesses alone, lost in the worlds of my favorite stories. Everything changed when I was 8. It was a crisp autumn evening, and Mom had made my favorite dinner, spaghetti and meatballs. I knew something was up because she seemed nervous, fidgeting with her napkin and avoiding eye contact. Finally, she took a deep breath and told me she had something important to share. That's when I learned about Sandra, 28F, my half-sister from Dad's previous relationship. Mom explained that Sandra lived with her mom on the East Coast, but wanted to get to know me. I was ecstatic. I'd always dreamed of having a sibling, someone to share secrets with and look up to. Our first phone call was that Sunday evening. I remember pacing nervously in my room, clutching the cordless phone and wondering what to say. But as soon as I heard Sandra's warm, friendly voice, my anxiety melted away. She asked me about school, my hobbies, my friends. I found myself chattering away about everything, how I was learning to play the recorder in music class, the stray cat I'd been feeding behind our building, the Nancy Drew book I was reading. Sandra was patient and attentive, laughing at my jokes and offering encouragement. She told me about her life too. She was a junior in high school, on the debate team, and hoping to study journalism in college. I was in awe of her, this cool older sister who seemed so worldly and accomplished. From that day on, our Sunday evening calls became the highlight of my week. I'd count down the days, jotting down notes about things I wanted to tell Sandra. As the years passed, our bond grew stronger. When I was 13 and being bullied at school for my thrift store clothes and lack of a smartphone, Sandra gave me advice on standing up for myself and focusing on the friends who truly cared about me. At 16, she talked me through my first crush and subsequent heartbreak, assuring me that the right person would come along when the time was right. Sandra sent me care packages for my birthdays and graduations, books she thought I'd like, cute accessories she picked up in New York where she went to college, even a hand-knitted scarf one winter. I treasured every gift, displaying them proudly in my room as tangible proof of our connection. Mom always encouraged my relationship with Sandra, but I noticed she seemed a bit sad sometimes after our calls. When I asked why, she'd just say she was glad I had Sandra in my life. I assumed she felt guilty about me not having a dad around, or maybe she was a little jealous of the bond Sandra and I shared. As I got older, I started to wonder why Sandra never visited or suggested we meet in person. When I brought it up, she always had a reason. She was busy with school, then work, then she got promoted and had a bunch of new responsibilities. I was disappointed, but I understood. We had such a great relationship over the phone and through texts. I tried not to let it bother me too much. Life went on. I graduated high school and started college, majoring in English with dreams of becoming a writer. Mom was so proud, telling everyone at the hospital about her daughter, the future author. I made a few close friends at school and even started dating a guy in my literature class. Things were good, stable. Then, 2 months ago, everything fell apart. Mom had been feeling tired lately, more than her usual post-shift exhaustion. She developed a persistent cough that wouldn't go away. After weeks of my pestering, she finally went to the doctor. The diagnosis was like a bomb dropping on our lives, stage 4 lung cancer. The doctors only gave her 6 months. I immediately took a leave of absence from college to care for her. My boyfriend, not understanding why I couldn't just hire a nurse, broke up with me. But I didn't care about any of that. All that mattered was being there for Mom, the way she'd always been there for me. Sandra was incredibly supportive during this time. She called more often, sometimes daily, to check on both of us. She offered advice on dealing with the healthcare system, shared resources on cancer support groups, and just listened when I needed to vent or cry. Having her support meant the world to me. Last week, Mom asked me to go through some old papers to get her affairs in order. It was a task I'd been dreading, not wanting to face the reality of her limited time left. But I knew it was important, so I steeled myself and headed up to our dusty attic. Among the boxes of old tax returns and childhood art projects, I found a small, battered shoebox. Inside was a stack of letters, yellowed with age, all addressed to Mom in unfamiliar handwriting. Curious, I started reading. What I found shook me to my core. The letters were from my dad, dated around the time he left. But they told a very different story than the one I'd grown up believing. Dad hadn't abandoned us willingly. According to the letters, Mom had an affair with a coworker and got pregnant with me. She told Dad I wasn't his, which led to their breakup. The letters were full of pain and confusion, with Dad begging for a paternity test and a chance to be in my life if I turned out to be his daughter. There were dozens of letters, spanning several years, all unanswered. I confronted Mom, my hands shaking as I held the letters. She broke down in tears and confessed everything. She said she panicked when she got pregnant, afraid Dad would leave her for his ex, Sandra's mom, if he knew. By the time she realized her mistake, she felt it was too late to fix things. She swore she regretted it every day, that she'd wanted to tell me the truth so many times but could never find the courage. I was reeling, trying to process this bombshell. Then another horrible thought struck me: what about Sandra? I asked Mom if Sandra was really my sister. She hesitated, then admitted Sandra wasn't real. Mom had made her up, feeling guilty that I didn't have any siblings or extended family in my life. She'd been the one calling me every week for 15 years, pretending to be my older sister. I felt like my entire world was crumbling. The sister I'd loved and looked up to for so long, the one person I thought I could always count on, was just a figment of my mother's imagination. All those conversations, all that advice and support, it had all been Mom, playing a character she created. I didn't know how to feel or what to do next. Part of me wanted to scream at Mom, to demand how she could lie to me for so long. Another part recognized how much pain and loneliness must have driven her to create this elaborate deception. And yet another part was grieving, mourning the loss of the sister I thought I had and the relationship with my father I'd never gotten to have. I'm writing this from a motel room down the street. I couldn't stay in that house with Mom after learning the extent of her deception. My whole life feels like a lie. The mother I thought I knew so well suddenly feels like a stranger. I don't know if I can ever forgive her, even with her being so sick. I'm lost and could use some outside perspectives. Am I overreacting? Where do I go from here? Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since I discovered the truth about my family, and to say it's been a roller coaster would be an understatement. Thank you all for your support and advice. It's been a lifeline during this chaotic time. After reading your comments, I realized I couldn't just leave things as they were with Mom. Despite my anger and hurt, I knew I'd regret it if I didn't try to talk things out, especially given her illness. So, after a week of avoiding her calls and texts, I steeled myself and went back to the house. Walking through the front door felt surreal. Everything looked the same: the faded floral wallpaper Mom always meant to replace, the collection of thrift store teacups on the mantel, the slightly crooked family photos on the wall. But it all felt different now, tainted by the knowledge of the lies that had festered here for so long. Mom was in her recliner, looking smaller and frailer than I remembered. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, then filled with tears. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy between us. The conversation that followed was intense and emotionally draining. Mom alternated between apologies and attempts to justify her actions. She spoke of her loneliness after Dad left, her fear of losing me if I knew the truth, her guilt over denying me a relationship with my father. She admitted that playing Sandra became an escape for her, a way to be the cool, put-together person she wished she could be, unburdened by the stresses of single motherhood and financial struggles. I told her how betrayed and manipulated I felt. Not only had she lied about my father, but she'd created this whole fake sister persona that shaped so much of my life. I'd shared my deepest thoughts and feelings with Sandra, thinking I was confiding in a sister, when it was really just Mom all along. Every piece of advice, every shared secret, every moment of sisterly bonding, it was all built on a lie. The hardest part was when Mom brought up her cancer. She begged me not to abandon her, saying she was terrified of dying alone. She talked about how much she regretted her choices, how she'd give anything to go back and do things differently. Part of me wanted to walk away and never look back. But seeing her so frail and scared, I couldn't do it. In the end, I agreed to help care for her, but I made it clear our relationship would never be the same. I told her I needed to set firm boundaries and would be seeking therapy to deal with all this. She accepted this, seeming relieved I wasn't cutting her off completely. I'm back living at the house now, but it's tense. I'm still angry and hurt, struggling to trust anything Mom says. But I'm trying to balance that with compassion for her condition. It's a daily challenge, forcing myself to be in the same space as her, to help with her medications and appointments while still processing my own emotions. I've started seeing a therapist, which is helping me work through some of the anger and grief. It's a slow process, but I'm learning to separate my love for Mom from my feelings about her actions. I'm also trying to reconnect with a few friends I have, realizing how much I'd isolated myself in recent years, relying too heavily on my relationship with Sandra. As for my real dad, I've done some initial research online. His name is James Henderson, and from what I can piece together, he's living in Seattle now. I found his email address through his work website. He's a high school English teacher, which explains where I got my love for literature. I've drafted about a dozen emails to him, but I can't bring myself to send any of them. What do you say to the father you never knew, who never knew you existed? Part of me is desperate to reach out, to finally have a chance at knowing my dad. But another part is terrified of rejection, of opening myself up to more pain. For now, I'm focusing on Mom's care and my own healing. I'm taking it day by day, trying to find a new normal in this shifted reality. Thank you again for all your support, it means more than you know. I'll update again when there's more to share. Update 2, it's been about a month since my last update, and things have taken some unexpected turns. Mom's health has deteriorated rapidly. The cancer spread to her brain, and she's now in hospice care. It's been heartbreaking watching the vibrant, hardworking woman I knew fade away. Despite everything, it's painful seeing the person who raised me, who shaped so much of who I am, slipping away before my eyes. Last week, during a rare lucid moment, Mom made another confession that left me reeling. Remember how I mentioned finding some information about my dad online, including that he was an English teacher in Seattle? Well, it turns out that was yet another of Mom's fabrications. She admitted she'd created that online presence years ago when I first started asking about my dad as a kid. She wanted me to think he had moved on and formed a new life, hoping it would stop me from trying to find him. The work website, the social media profiles, all fake. I was stunned. Just when I thought there couldn't possibly be any more lies, this bombshell dropped. I didn't even have the energy to be angry anymore. I just felt drained, wondering if there was anything in my life that was actually real. With Mom's permission, I reached out to her sister, my Aunt Karen, 50F, whom I'd only met a few times as a child. Our family wasn't close. Mom had always said they drifted apart after some argument years ago, but now I wondered if that was true. I explained the situation to Aunt Karen over the phone. She was shocked by everything I told her, especially about the Sandra deception. She confirmed Mom's story about the affair, saying the family had suspected but never knew for sure. As for my dad, she didn't know much, but she did have an old address for him in Portland. Turns out he might have been living in the same city as us all along. This new information left me with mixed emotions. On one hand, I was relieved to finally have a real lead on finding my dad. On the other, I was angry that he might have been so close all these years without ever trying to find me. But then I reminded myself that he thought I wasn't his child. Why would he have looked for me? After much deliberation, I decided to write my dad a letter. I figured it was less invasive than showing up at his door or calling out of the blue. I explained who I was and gave a brief overview of the situation. I told him I didn't expect anything, but would be open to talking if he was willing. I sent the letter last week, and now I'm anxiously waiting for a response, if there even is one. Part of me is excited at the possibility of finally knowing my dad, but another part is terrified of being rejected or disappointed again. In the meantime, I'm trying to balance caring for Mom, sorting out her affairs, and processing my own emotions. It's overwhelming, but I'm taking it one day at a time. My therapist has been a huge help, giving me tools to cope with the stress and work through my complicated feelings about Mom. I've also been spending more time with Aunt Karen. She's been visiting Mom in hospice and helping me navigate some of the practical aspects of this situation. It's nice to have family support, even if it's new and a bit awkward. As for Mom, her lucid moments are becoming fewer and farther between. When she is aware, she mostly wants to reminisce about happy memories from my childhood. I'm trying to focus on those positive moments, to remember the good parts of our relationship amidst all the lies and pain. I'll update again when I hear back from my dad, if I hear back at all. Wish me luck. Update 3. I received a response from my dad, James, 56M, about a week ago. The letter arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I stared at the envelope for a long time before working up the courage to open it. Inside was a handwritten note, the penmanship neat but slightly shaky, as if written by an unsteady hand. James expressed shock at receiving my letter but also a deep desire to meet. He confirmed that Mom had told him I wasn't his, leading to their breakup. He tried to stay in touch at first, but Mom shut him out completely. Eventually, he convinced himself it was better to move on, but admitted he'd always wondered about Mom's child. We arranged to meet for lunch at a small cafe downtown, neutral ground for both of us. The days leading up to our meeting were a blur of anxiety and anticipation. I changed my outfit a dozen times that morning, unsure how to dress for such a momentous occasion. When I walked into the cafe, I spotted him immediately. James was sitting at a corner table, nervously fidgeting with a napkin. The moment our eyes met, I felt a jolt of recognition. I saw bits of myself in his features. We had the same nose and chin. It was both comforting and strange. James stood up as I approached, awkwardly extending his hand before pulling me into a gentle hug instead. We were both teary-eyed as we sat down. For a few moments, we just looked at each other, taking in the reality of this long-awaited meeting. The conversation that followed was intense and emotional. James was clearly nervous, but warm and eager to talk. He told me about his life. He never remarried or had other kids. He'd thrown himself into his work as an English teacher, finding fulfillment in helping students discover their love for literature. I shared stories about my childhood, my college experiences, and my aspirations to become a writer. James's eyes lit up when I mentioned this, and he told me about some of his favorite authors. We discovered we had similar taste in books, which led to an animated discussion about literature. As we talked, I felt a mix of emotions. There was joy at finally connecting with my father, but also a deep sadness for all the years we'd lost. I couldn't help but wonder how different my life might have been if he'd been a part of it from the beginning. James asked about Mom's condition and offered his condolences. To my surprise, he harbored no ill will towards her. He said he'd made peace with the past years ago, focusing instead on the present and future. He even offered to visit her in hospice if she was open to it, which touched me deeply. We ended up talking for hours, losing track of time as we got to know each other. Before we parted, we agreed to take things slow but stay in touch. James gave me his phone number and email, encouraging me to reach out anytime. Since then, we've been texting regularly. It's a bit awkward sometimes. We're still figuring out how to navigate this new relationship. But it's also exciting to finally have a chance to know my dad. Mom passed away yesterday. Despite everything, I'm glad I was there for her in the end. Her last few days were peaceful, and she seemed to find some measure of acceptance. In her final lucid moment, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "I'm sorry and I love you." I'm left with a complex mix of grief, anger, and relief that's hard to untangle. James is coming to the funeral next week. He said he wants to pay his respects and be there for me if I need support. I'm grateful for his offer, even though I know it might be uncomfortable for both of us. I don't know what the future holds. I'm still processing everything that's happened and trying to figure out my next steps. But for the first time in months, I feel a glimmer of hope. I have a chance to know my real dad and maybe even build a family I've always wanted. Thank you all for your advice and support throughout this journey. It's been a roller coaster of emotions, but I'm starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. I'll update again if there are any significant developments, but for now, I'm focusing on healing and moving forward, one day at a time.